Alright. SCP-1337, The Hitchhiker, by, you know, them boys over there at SCP Infographics, SCP Explained. So let's go ahead and get into it. Let's see what it's talking about.
Stop me if you've heard this one before. A young man was driving home from work late one rainy night when he spotted a woman in a white dress and a red sweater walking along the shoulder of the road. Concerned for her safety, he slowed down and rolled down the window so he could talk to her. When he asked where she was going, she said she was walking to her parents' house. The man pulled over and offered her a ride that she accepted. The woman gave him the address of her home, hopped in the back seat, and the man drove off. He sensed that she must have been cold from walking in the rain, so he cranked up the car's heater to help her dry off. Soon she removed her heavy red sweater and placed it on the seat next to her. The man tried to make friendly conversation, asking if the woman had a job, what she was studying at school, where'd she been that day, but she remained quiet, staring out the window, until they drove past an old graveyard. The woman began pounding on the glass of the car as if she desperately wanted something. Unsure of what to do, the man pulled over, but before he could ask her what was happening, she had gotten out of the car. He exited the car to try and find her.
No, okay. Alright. I don't care who you are, man. You could be Rihanna, Beyonce, you could be the baddest bitch on the planet Earth. I'm driving and it's nightfall, and you want me to, and you're over here with your thumb out, we're like, hey, you know what I mean? No, sir. I'm not picking nobody up. Why would I pick up a random stranger in my car? I'm going straight home, driving past nigga 90 miles per hour, 20 over speed limit. You know what I mean? Especially in a road highway, bro. You never know what's going on in the road. Not only that, you know, only exception there is to this is if you what you call it? If you're like a Uber Lyft driver. At that point, then like GG my guy. GG my guy.
But the woman was nowhere to be seen. She must have somehow ran off. Confused, the man got back in his car and drove away. He went on his way and didn't think of it again until the next day, when he noticed her sweater was still in the back of his car. He decided to go to the house she had originally given him the address for and give it back to her. He found the home without any trouble, but when he knocked on the door, the old woman who answered it was confused by his story. She told him that her daughter couldn't have possibly left her sweater in his car because she died in a car accident 30 years ago. The Vanishing Hitchhiker is a classic ghost story.
Yeah. This is only strange because it's the sweater is physical, like it's a physical object. So how the hell did?
With the details varying from place to place and storyteller to storyteller. In Chicago, she goes by Resurrection Mary, named after the graveyard she asks for rides to. In Okinawa, Japan, she's known as the Nightwalker of Nago, and she only appears to taxi drivers. In Kent, England, she's Suzanne, a bride killed in a car wreck on the way to her bachelorette party. In North Carolina, her name is Lydia, and in Hawaii, she's believed to be the goddess Pele in human form. But as far as our friends at the SCP Foundation are concerned, the Vanishing Hitchhiker's name is Mary Talish, also known as SCP-1337. On the 19th of May, 1952, college sophomore Mary Talish was abducted on her way to class in her hometown of Muncie, Indiana. When police found her body 2 weeks later, her eyes and heart had been torn from her body in a ritualistic fashion. She had scrapes and bruises that suggested she had been beaten before her murder. Her killers were never caught, and her body was returned to her family for burial in Tomlinson Cemetery. Starting on the 19th of June that same year, someone matching Mary's description, a Caucasian woman with blonde hair standing 150 centimeters tall and wearing a red sweater, was spotted trying to flag down passing vehicles along Mayflower Road. Since then, every month on the 19th, Mary has been sighted along that stretch of road, and every month the same scenario plays out. Mary gives anyone who picks her up directions to her parents' house. Then on the way, she instructs the driver to stop at the graveyard where she was buried. She vanishes from the car, leaving her sweater. The driver of the car tries to return the sweater to her parents' house, only to be told that Mary Talish was dead. When the SCP Foundation was made aware of Mary Talish's pattern of haunting in the late 50s, they set up a system where agents would patrol Mayflower Road at hourly intervals with the intention of picking Mary up. Agents were sent on their own, in non-Foundation cars, and instructed to stick to the accepted script of the Vanishing Hitchhiker legend, without attempting to engage Mary in further conversation. Mary's parents were also given E-Class agent status to keep them from speaking about the haunting, and told that the Foundation was working on a way to set the spirit to rest. Early attempts to study the apparition were inconclusive. It proved impossible for the Foundation to relocate her or trigger her manifestation outside of the 19th of every month. And attempts to analyze her sweater were fruitless, since if the sweater wasn't returned to the Talish family home, it would simply vanish from containment at or around sunset on the next 19th. For 20 years, SCP-1337 events continued to happen as normal. D-Class personnel under the instruction of the Foundation would pick Mary up.
How'd they go from SCP Foundation personnel to D-Class personnel? Wild.
Drive her past the cemetery, and return her sweater to her parents. It was business as usual, and in fact it was one of the more sedate reoccurring apparitions the Foundation had to deal with. But, as you might have guessed, that peace wouldn't last forever. Enter Dr. Lawson, who in 1972 was placed in charge of all resources regarding SCP-1337. Dr. Lawson was getting sick of all this phantom hitchhiker business, and while most of the Foundation was happy to keep this routine going, Lawson thought that the continual picking up and dropping off of Mary Talish and her red sweater was a waste of the Foundation's valuable time.
This niggas like this is why we can't have anything nice, bro.
After all, it was the early 70s. The price of oil was at an all-time high, so the expense of sending car after car up and down the same road for a solid day once a month just to pick up a ghost was more trouble than it was worth. So Lawson started developing a plan, one that he didn't go through the proper Foundation channels to approve. He reasoned that the reason Mary's ghost kept coming back was because she wanted something. Since always asked for a ride home, then it must mean she wanted to return back to her parents. So logic followed that if she had nothing or no one to go back to, then she'd stop appearing. On the 18th of June 1973, Lawson went ahead with his plan without his superior's knowledge and ordered the execution of Mary Talish's parents, as well as the immediate demolition of their family.
Yo, you're bugging out, bro. You're bugging. Those are still innocent human beings, bro. You're bugging out. He's bugging out. Hell.
According to his journals, Lawson had hoped that his attempt at decommissioning 1337 would significantly cut the Foundation's gas bills, freeing up valuable funds, at which point he'd surely be promoted in recognition of his brilliance. But that wasn't what happened. Lawson was demoted from team leader to junior staff, and only kept on 1337 detail out of the belief that, without a family to return to, Lawson would become the new focal point of the haunting should Mary Talish ever return. Though Lawson's actions weren't at all above board, even by SCP Foundation standards, they did seem to have worked. The 19th of June came and went without a single Mary sighting, and she wasn't seen the next month either. A full year went by without any sign of the Mayflower Road apparition. Satisfied with this turn of events, the Foundation made the decision to officially reclassify SCP-1337 from safe to safe decommissioned, and the gas money that was budgeted for the Mayflower Road Patrol was redirected to the SCP-682 Tank Acid Fund. But even though everything seemed to have been sorted out, Lawson wasn't entirely satisfied, and not just because of his demotion. Whether it was intuition or merely guilt-induced paranoia is unclear, but he suspected that Mary was still out there somewhere. At first he thought that she might show up on the anniversary of her parents' deaths, but then that date came and went, as did 8 more anniversaries after it. Finally, on the 19th of June 1983, Lawson decided he had to see for himself. Fitted with recording equipment, he drove alone, in a non-Foundation standard car, down that lonely stretch of road, where so many before him had stopped to pick up that mysterious blonde woman with the red sweater. He had to prove to himself that she wouldn't show up, that he had really and truly gotten rid of her for good. It was about 5 o'clock in the evening when he reached Mayflower Road.
I don't know why he just gonna get his peace of mind and live his life. It's niggas like this, bruh.
At first, he didn't experience anything strange. He scanned the roadside, looking for the phantom hitchhiker walking along it, but there was nobody there. Dr. Lawson breathed a sigh of relief. He may have orchestrated the deaths of 2 innocent people, but at least it hadn't been for nothing. He turned on the recorder he brought with him and logged that nothing had happened. SCP-1337 had been permanently neutralized. As he approached the T intersection and prepared to turn onto Marsh Avenue, he looked up to adjust his rearview mirror. To his horror, He found that he wasn't alone in the car. Someone was in the seat behind him. Someone with blonde hair and a red sweater. His last transmission consisted only of, "Wait, who the hell are you?" before the recording abruptly stopped. Lawson's car was found soon after by Foundation agents. Lawson was dead in the front seat, bruised and bloody, with his eyes and heart ripped out in a ritualistic fashion.
Wow.
Just the way Mary Talish had been found all the way back in 1952.
Wow, that's
It turns
tough.
out that Mary hadn't been neutralized after all. She'd just been waiting for a chance to get revenge on the man who killed her family. And Mary didn't stop with Dr. Lawson. No longer does she appear, walking along the road waiting for someone to offer her a ride before disappearing without incident. Now, should someone pass by without offering a ride, she will appear in their back seat before reenacting the method of her own death upon the driver. And her physical appearance has changed too. Whereas before she looked like the image of a pretty young woman before her tragedy, now recordings show that she appears with the wounds of her death present, her eyes gouged out in their sockets, and a massive hole in her chest where her heart
Down
should be.
horrible,
The same
bro.
wounds she inflicts on her victims. The SCP Foundation has tried closing off and eventually destroying the road, but that has only resulted in Mary manifesting at other locations in and around Meansea. Foundation documents reveal that any back road in the city can potentially serve as host to a 1337 event, and all attempts to contain the apparition have failed. The only way someone who has seen Mary can avoid her wrath is by stopping to pick her up, at which point she will dematerialize before reappearing on another road. Mobile task forces have been unsuccessful, as Mary only appears to those driving alone, and all agents who have been sent on solo missions to apprehend her have resulted in the death of the agent. SCP-1337 was reinstated, this time as Euclid class. Currently, the Foundation's method of managing SCP-1337 is to dispatch a security team on the 19th of every month to monitor all the places where a potential sighting could take place. As soon as signs of a manifestation are identified, a remotely controlled vehicle containing a single D-Class is driven to the location. Once Mary appears in the car is piloted to the empty lot where her home used to stand, and the remains of the D-Class are then disposed of. Like a lot of the stories that get passed down as urban
So that's literally y'all just killing the D-Class. They don't got no chance at all. Wow.
legends, the story of SCP-1337 has a lesson that can be taken away from it. This SCP started off as an ordinary local haunting, no more deadly than Lydia, Suzanne, Resurrection Mary, or any of the countless other local versions of the Vanishing Hitchhiker story. But thanks to one rogue Foundation doctor and his desire to rush what he thought would be an efficient solution, the spirit not only became harder to control, but also much more violent and bloodthirsty than anyone was prepared to deal with. So if there's anything we can learn here, it's that no matter if you're a student, an office worker, or a researcher with the SCP Foundation, think twice about cutting corners. It might save you a little bit of time and money in the short term, but in the long term, the results could be fatal.
Ooh.
Now go check out...
Oh, that's fire. Oh, that's fire. I like that lesson. I like that lesson, y'all. Yes, sir. Y'all heard what the man said. It's not worth it, bro. The long term. Think the long term. Rich people think about long term. You know what I mean? Trust me. Long term, bro. Long term. That's fire, yo. Shout out these niggas, bro. Oh God. Oh God.